What is up, my Squirtleites? It is I, your king, welcoming you to a brand new series. That's right, when I said 5 to 7 videos a week, I didn't just mean Let's Play episodes. I have some other ideas that I wanted to sprinkle in here and there, just to kind of keep you guys busy and to keep myself occupied as well, so that I'm not burning out on whatever games I'm currently playing. And one of the ideas that I have had for actually a very, very long time and have failed to implement in all that time is a series like this, a discussion slash, I guess, solo podcast style series where I just kind of ramble a bit, but obviously ramble with a point to it. There are topics that I want to discuss and hopefully spark a discussion with you guys, and you can go over them in the comments. Now, I've made attempts at this in the past, but they really haven't gone over well, but I think I have more of a concise and clear idea of what I want to do with it this time around, and now I can officially make this as a series. That said, this is not going to be a daily series. It's not even going to be a weekly series. It's just going to be kind of uploaded as they come. For the most part, I'm usually going to try to touch on topics whenever they're very currently relevant when it comes to video games. Whether or not that's talking about something in the news. Obviously, I don't want to get into anything political, but like, news regarding, the actions of certain developers and companies, or possibly news about certain games coming out, and just kind of share my opinions on that, and then again, hopefully spark a discussion with you guys in the comments, so you guys can tell me if you agree with any of my points, or if you have differing opinions, and we can just have a discussion. Because I feel like formats like this are much better for discussion than the cesspools that are social media, or even YouTube comment sections where things aren't coherently put together. And that's kind of my goal here, is to coherently make a concise and easy to understand argument as best as I can without scripting it, so that you guys can understand what I'm talking about. Now, today's first episode is definitely not going to be something I think that's too controversial. It's just something that's really sparked this whole idea to begin with, and is something that I kind of wanted to touch upon in my return video, but I felt like if I would have, spent the time necessary to go over this, it would have muddied that video way too much and would have made it drag on for, way longer than it should have, 30, 40, 50 minutes, and I didn't want to do that. So I kind of wanted to make this its own thing. So consider this the first episode of whatever I end up calling this series. I don't have a title for it at the time of recording it, but I'm sure I will whenever it goes up. Regardless, let's go over it, because this is something that's kind of really had me wrapped up for the past several months. And honestly, this stems all the way back, I would say, to early 2016 with some pretty bad habits that I picked up when it came to buying and playing games. And, I'm not going to go out here and judge anybody's buying or playing habits, because everybody enjoys games in their own different way. But it's definitely something that kind of contributed to the whole burnout that I felt. I would say it was the other part of it, besides the fact that I felt like I was playing games more as an obligation rather than to actually enjoy them. I mean, this kind of goes hand in hand with that, but you'll see what I mean. So, starting back in 2016, I really started to get invested in the industry itself. Like, from a developer and publisher standpoint, I started watching a lot of videos about news and, things like that, like trying to learn about the way the industry works, to educate myself in a way. But I kind of got a little bit more invested than I probably should have. Because, well, one, the video game industry is not a good industry. I mean, most industries are not. It's not a healthy industry, and in a way, following the video game industry too closely, I'm not saying that it's not a good thing, because you should be educated in your purchases and your decisions when it comes to video games, but the video game industry can definitely induce pessimism in people very easily. And there's a difference between being pessimistic and being cautious about things. And in fact, I think it's definitely healthier to always be cautiously optimistic rather than constantly look at things in a depressed way. You should definitely, again, be educated, be informed, but don't just be depressed about the way that the video game industry is. And I definitely think I started to feel that way, but again, it stems back to 2016. So that was the year where I decided I'm just going to grab every single big release, regardless of whether or not I know I'm going to like it, give them all a shot and see how it goes. Now, the funny thing about that is 2016 was actually a success. There were so many games that came out that year that I genuinely adored, that it kind of reinforced the idea that maybe this was a good thing, that, buying games and playing games in this way was actually a positive thing, to, basically just play everything that was relevant, and, maybe I'll like it more than I thought I would. And again, all throughout 2016, I came across so many games that I fell in love with, so many good titles. I mean, that I still believe that that is, you know, the best year in terms of video game releases I've ever had. However, that, you know, that philosophy and that mentality then bled into 2017, where the exact opposite effect happened, where I was almost constantly and consistently disappointed by every single game that came out. Now, there were exceptions, obviously. One of the big ones was, for me, was Horizon Zero Dawn, but there were other games that came out that year. I can't think of all of them off the top of my head, because honestly, the last 2 years have been a total blur. But there were good games, but a lot of my most anticipated games were disappointments. And it all definitely came to a head with the release of Destiny 2, where I was more disappointed than I've ever been. And at the same time, in hindsight, I probably shouldn't have been so disappointed, but I still kind of felt like a genuine, I suppose, depression when it came to my view on the video game industry at that point, just because I just... Not that I didn't think that Bungie couldn't fail. I never had that much faith in Bungie. It was just more the fact that I couldn't believe the stranglehold that publishers have had on video game developers to that sort of extent, that it neuters every product that comes out nowadays. And, you know, that kind of bled into 2018, which then turned into a sense of apathy. I just didn't care about anything that was coming out. I just didn't... You know, no matter how much it would have excited me originally, I just didn't want to play anything. The only game I, you know, actually leapt on, you know, for its release was the Shadow Colossus remake, which obviously I was going to like that. I knew I was going to like that. I knew I was going to adore everything about it, and I did, but it also didn't require a whole lot of time investment. To add to that came the whole live service problem. And I want to... This is kind of another portion of this video that I'll get into more in depth, but it's a realization I came to when I started playing Monster Hunter World, a game I genuinely did enjoy, but I could not physically bring myself to invest in and play any further, and I'll touch upon that more later. But the whole point of this was the fact that by, you know, the time my burnout settled in, I just wasn't having fun. I didn't think games were enjoyable anymore, partly because of the mentality that had fostered over the few years of, you know, implementing these really bad habits, but also just because, you know, I was playing them, you know, again, as an obligation. I just wasn't having fun anymore. And I stopped, I pulled back, and I actually did something that I don't think everybody needs to do this, but I would recommend this to people, is to go do a little bit of reading on some of the history behind Nintendo. I know this sounds kind of weird, but I actually did a lot of research on Nintendo's background, Nintendo's history, and a lot of the people that have worked in Nintendo over the years. A lot of things, you know, a lot of business decisions made by Hiroshi Yamauchi, Minoru Arakawa, who was the Nintendo of America president back in the 90s, you know, Howard Lincoln, and all these other people that worked in Nintendo back in its heyday in the 80s and 90s. And also the works of Satoru Iwata and Shigeru Miyamoto, Masahiro Sakurai, all these figureheads that Nintendo's had over the years, and I just decided to study up on a bunch of them. And something that I noticed, and is something that I definitely respect Nintendo for now, and before I go into this, I want to make clear, I'm not a fanboy of anybody. I try to criticize every single corporation with an equal, you know, with equal bias, unless they're being extra terrible with the like, you know, Electronic Arts and Activision. You know, those horrible, horrible corporations that you should never trust. But when it comes to Nintendo, Sony, Xbox, I'm not a fanboy. I think fanboyism is stupid. It really is. I do latch on to whoever's being the best at the moment, absolutely, and I will support them for that behavior. But at the same time, I will also criticize them for bad behavior. Right now, I will openly admit, Sony is on my shit list. Nintendo and Xbox are definitely appealing to me more and more as of late. They are definitely the good guys. But as people probably know from my social media, I was heavily critical towards Nintendo for a while. And I still have my fair share of criticisms to make, but, you know, as is the nature of a video game company. But something I really respect about Nintendo, probably the thing I respect the most about Nintendo, is their design philosophy. And that's the thing, too. It doesn't just boil down to a quote made by both Miyamoto and Iwata, although they're phrased differently. It's just the genuine philosophy behind the company that has always been there ever since the release of the NES. It's been like this, and it's that the core of video games is that they are supposed to be fun. Now, Obviously, people play video games for different reasons. Not everybody is just out there to play video games for fun. A lot of people do it for the mental challenge, whether or not it's, to test their brain, or it's to test their reflexes or their might, whatever kind of game that they want to play, whether it's an action game, a shooter, a racing game, a puzzle game, a platformer, things that are very difficult. Some people just play video games to get the high and the rush and the adrenaline out of conquering the hardest challenges that video games can throw at them. That's fine. I would still argue that that's a form of seeking out fun. It's just that that's a different brand of fun. But that really, I do think, is the core of video games, obviously, is that they should be fun. Now, in hindsight, that's a really obvious sentiment, but it's something that I think people need to be reminded of very often, especially in the current day and age where the video game industry does not at all care about fun. This is something that has been festering over the past, I would be willing to say, as far back as the implementation of online gaming. Specifically, end of Generation 6, moving into Gen 7. So, beginning with, the Xbox 360, PS3, Wii, that era. And has, just gotten worse over the years, is the fact that game publishers, more specifically, less so game developers, but game publishers don't want us to have fun. They just want us to be addicted. They want us to get hooked. That is why live services are currently the craze. And it's not just, the looter shooter live service. When people think live service, they often point to Destiny, The Division, Anthem. It's not just those games. It's also the Apex Legends of the world. It's also the Fortnites, the PUBGs. It's also the yearly releases that companies like Ubisoft put out, like Assassin's Creed and Far Cry. They are these games that are designed to not just give you an experience, but then constantly satiate you. Not make it enjoyable, but satiate your appetite for more content. Not more fun, just more content. More things to do, regardless of whether or not it's fun. It just has to keep you hooked. It has to be addictive. Now, there's a huge problem with this for many reasons. One of these is the fact that it does fundamentally, miss the point of video games. I don't think that that's right. And again, credit to Nintendo as of late, where they have been very, very focused on bringing fun to people. They don't make live services. They're not really a thing. They're not in the market of, a video game and then, second and third video game on top of that in the form of DLC. That's just never been their business model. Again, I guess outside of Super Smash, but even that's debatable. That's just not how they do things, and I really appreciate that from Nintendo. I really appreciate their core experiences, but also Sony and Microsoft to an extent. They care more about first-party single-player games that can sell their system. They care about their system sellers, and third-party companies do not care about this. But the other issue with this is something that I discovered while playing Monster Hunter World at the beginning of last year, and also Warframe at the beginning of this year, both of which are really good games, by the way. I think they're both just excellent, phenomenally fun games that I could absolutely, if I somehow had the time and I had the ability and energy to just stop everything and invest myself in those games until I was done with them, I would love to do that. They are incredibly enjoyable games, but unfortunately that is not how reality works. That is not how the concept of time works. Unfortunately, I have a job. I have time, that I have to allocate towards other things. And I already have a live service that I am invested in and attached to, and I have been since 2014, and that is Destiny. I physically cannot invest the time required to get hooked on any other game in that way that all of these other publishers are trying to make. And therefore, I don't feel compelled to buy any of them at all. Granted, yes, you absolutely can just have these, very basic, campaign-only experiences with these kinds of games. But I'll tell you what, all of those games are going to suck if that's all you're going in for. If you're just going in to play the game from the start until the end of the quote-unquote campaign with the likes of The Division, with the likes of Anthem, were it actually good, with the likes of the upcoming Borderlands 3, were it the likes of even Monster Hunter World, or any of these other games that try this whole, this idea, this model, you're never going to have fun because that's not where the games are, are at their best. They are in the investment. They are in the long term, the end game, all of these things that you need plenty of time to get into. I at the moment, adore Destiny. I have so much fun with it even now and have never run out of things to do with it. It's so dang fun. But I look at all of these other games and I just think I can't even glance their way because it's not healthy. I'm going to make a purchase decision that I know instantly I'm going to regret because I just can't give them that time of day. And I know I'm not the only person who's that way. I don't have all the time in the world to play video games, but I will also concede that I have a lot more time to play video games than plenty of other people do. People with, second jobs or families or in worse situations than I'm in, or people that just, do not have the funds to have very many games. They can only buy like 1 or 2 games a year, if at all. I mean, there are a lot of people that are in situations like that as opposed to people who have a lot more time than I do. So I don't understand how video game companies think this is okay. I don't really understand this logic of making these kinds of live services. Monster Hunter World was the worst one because I got about 20 hours into that game and I was trying to take it at the pace that was suggested to me of really trying to grind things out because I'm not good at the game. I didn't know Monster Hunter before starting that game. I was trying to take it at the pace of I'm going to grind out as many materials as I possibly can and min-max everything and try to get the best sets and, complete every single area before I moved on to the next one. And I was about halfway through the second area, just the second area, and I was just like, I can't do this. I love this game, but I can't do this. I can't continue playing this game because I don't have the time. I don't have the resources. It wasn't even a patience thing. It was just I physically am incapable of playing this game when there's already something else that's got my attention that I enjoy even slightly more. And again, that just, first of all, it's sad, but second of all, it just kind of comes down to the core experience of I want to have fun. And that's why I do choose Destiny over these games, is because that game is, at least now, to me, more fun. It's just enjoyable to play that game. It's enjoyable to shoot those guns. That's why I play it all the time, is because I think that the core aspect of the gameplay is really fun. Again, I tried this with Warframe, and now it's a little bit different because that game is free. But that game is also far more daunting to get into because it has years and years and years and years of content all on top of it that just make it this massive undertaking that if I ever want to get even close to the end game, it's going to take me, forever to get there. And I am enjoying it. I'm having a lot of fun. It's definitely a little bit more grindy than I would like, but still the core experience itself is incredibly enjoyable. And again, I stopped part of the way through and just went, I can't. Now, granted, I can actually always go back to that game because, it's a free-to-play game. But at the same time, I still had the same exact revelation. So with all of that said, again, talking about the fact that games aren't even trying to be fun anymore, there was one huge breath of fresh air that I ran into a couple of months ago that I do think kind of rekindled the fire in me. I think this is the game, or I guess I should say the product that is responsible for this feeling. And it's something I do want to share with you guys at some point. It's a game I'm definitely going to play, or games I'm definitely going to play at some point. And this was shortly after the hiatus. I actually had this game since it launched back in November, but I finally got around to playing this in February, and that is Spyro Reignited Trilogy. The Spyro Reignited Trilogy, excuse me. Now, I've only made it through the first 2 games. I have not even started the third game as of recording this, but I have not had so much fun with a video game, I would say probably since Doom. Just pure unadulterated fun. Like, not even like investment in the story or awe or wonderment. Just, pure unabashed, goofy grinning the whole time I'm playing fun. I played those games and I couldn't stop until I had the platinum trophies with both of them, the first and the second game. And I'd never played Spyro before this. I was never a PlayStation kid. I never owned a PlayStation system until around 2006. And the first game I had was Star Wars Battlefront 2. And then I got Midnight Club 3 and the Medal of Honor games. And those were like all I had until I moved out. And then that's when I got a PS3 and moved on to more things. Like, was not a PlayStation kid growing up. I was a Nintendo kid. I had a 64, I had a GameCube, I played a crap ton of Super Mario Sunshine and Banjo-Tooie. Those were my big mascot platformers that I loved. And yeah, I never got to experience any of the Sony mascot platformers, really. So I didn't know if they were any good, but I saw the aesthetic of the Spyro trilogy and I was like, that's intriguing. I think I might get this. And oh my gosh, I have never had so much fun. Just, at least in a very long time. It was such a wonderful, wonderful experience. And it really brought that feeling back to me of this is what video games are about. I mean, I also do like video games for the sake of escapism. I do like to immerse myself in the worlds, which is why I do like games like Shadow of the Colossus, Okami, Skyrim, these big open adventures. I enjoy those as well for that reason. But just being able to sit down and just have a good time, from the moment I turn on the console until the moment I turn it off, it's just such a refreshing experience. And yeah, I really, really, really did enjoy those games. And I can't wait to try the third one. I'm going to get around to it at some point in my free time. But, yeah, hats off to Spyro, seriously. And hats off to Toys for Bob for that remake and really making it aesthetically pleasing. Because I'll be honest, I mean, I was so late to the party. Why in the world would I look at a PlayStation 1 game and think I'd ever want to go back to that? Like, let's be real. So, honestly, I'm really glad that they're making those kinds of games. I'm glad that we're having this resurgence of mascot platformers and mascot-based games, even if it's small. By the way, also want to recommend another game that's made me feel that way is A Hat in Time. Now, I haven't made as much progress in that game, but that game definitely shares a lot of the same sentiments. It has some polish issues, which does kind of get at me sometimes. And if that's the kind of thing that's going to bother you, you might have a couple problems, but outside of those polish issues, that game is just wonderful, and it is so charming and cute. And yeah, I would highly recommend it to everybody. I know some people are holding out on the physical release of that game, as I kind of am, but I also love that game so much, and it's at such a low price, I wouldn't mind, I have it digitally, but I also wouldn't mind buying it again physically, if that makes sense. I'm willing to support the Gears for Breakfast people who made the game. So, I mean, obviously not everybody has the money or the funds to be able to do that, but that's my philosophy, is just they're worth supporting in that regard because of the work that they've done here. But I digress. Still, I'm just kind of rambling at this point and gushing about these really fun games. But yeah, it's also, a philosophy I kind of want to focus on in this channel in the future. I want to do more just straight up fun games. I just want to have fun. That's what video games are supposed to be about, and Nintendo knows it. Look at the quotes from Miyamoto and Iwata. They're right. They were always right, and they will continue to be right. Even in the future, as the medium continues to evolve, I want fun to be at the core of the video game industry forever and ever. And if we have to rely on the indie games industry for that from now on, you know what? So be it. But at least someone's doing it. At least there are people that are still going at it. And honestly, I'm just, yeah, it's the best. It really is the best. So anyways, ladies and gentlemen, I think I've talked your guys' ear off long enough in this video, but hope you guys like this format. Hope you guys like the discussion. Let me know what you guys think on all of this in the comments below. How do you feel? Here's my question, actually. What kind of games make you feel that way? What are the games that you go to just have that pure, unadulterated fun? I feel like most of those kinds of games are going to be solo experiences. Like, in multiplayer games, there's always going to be some semblance of frustration, so they don't quite hit the spot. At least for everybody. There are some people who probably feel that way about those kinds of games, but if you just need to have a good old time, just sit down and enjoy yourself and just, grin from ear to ear the whole time you're playing a video game, what game is that for you guys? I really want to know. But with all of that said, ladies and gentlemen, thank you all so very much for watching this episode. I hope you all enjoyed it very, very much, and I will see you all in the next one.